Hey everyone, I thought I would take a couple minutes to talk through one of my favorite options for body health and maintenance that is a really great tool on a day-to-day basis as a musician. And as you can see, I have a small army of these in front of me. We're talking about using balls to self-massage. What is the advantage of using a ball? It is a lot smaller than a foam roller. I know they make half rollers, and I know there are people I've seen who keep one of these in their locker at work, but a lot of us don't have lockers at work. This is another common tool that you'll see that's not as easily portable as you might like, especially if like me, your work is often done, say, out of a backpack, so you can carry your earplugs and pencils and music and maybe a ball. So let's talk a little bit about what balls for self-massage are most useful for. They are most useful for addressing knots in your muscles, doing something called myofascial release, where you're looking at the muscles and the fascia that connect the muscles and identifying knots and points of tension and releasing them. One of the first questions you will have to answer when you're considering this is, how hard a ball do I want to use? And that's really a totally personal question. It depends a lot on your personal pain tolerance, what your level of discomfort is with the knots that you're experiencing. And you always have to remember that the goal is not to punish yourself. You're not trying to beat up your knots and your points of tension. You're trying to help yourself feel better and release those knots and those points of tension. So I have them sort of arranged these for, this is a practice lacrosse ball, which is very much like the pink toy balls we used to have when we were kids. This is spongy rubber, pretty soft. A tennis ball, very useful, light, also fairly soft and forgiving. So if your pain tolerance isn't so high, if you aren't dealing with, well, if either of you are not dealing with really severe knots, or if you are, something a little gentler like one of these two might be the answer. This is a lacrosse ball. To me, this is sort of a gold standard, but I have a fairly high pain tolerance. And the other thing that's really fantastic about lacrosse balls is because they are a hard rubber, they tend to grip a little bit. And so when we go into some of the techniques that you can use a ball for self-massage, that little bit of grip and the fact that it doesn't slip so easily can be a really useful thing. Now this is a purpose-made massage ball. You can see it's a little bit larger than the others. It's quite firm. It's a firm, slightly yielding plastic, and it is textured. So that accomplishes some of the same goal as using the rubber lacrosse ball. It enables it to grip a little bit better. It also lets it dig in a little bit. Let's see. These two guys are special tools, and these are actually the same thing. So these are called, if you look on Amazon or if you look them up online, they're called thoracic peanuts, because obviously they're shaped like a peanut, and one of their greatest uses is to mobilize and massage your thoracic spine. So this one is one that I made using 2 tennis balls and some athletic tape. And if you look online, again, there are some really great tutorials on how to do that. It's not that difficult. You tie them together and you make a big figure 8. You do that a lot. You use a lot of tape, but you end up with something that is not going to fall apart, that is yielding like a tennis ball, and that you can use for anything you can use the thoracic peanut for. This is the kind of thing that you will find if you shop on Amazon. This is basically 2 lacrosse balls attached with a little bridge of rubber. And again, it's a little bit harder than this. You pay money for it to buy the one that's pre-made as opposed to the one that you can make yourself. And down here at the very end, we have a very specialized tool, the golf ball. Since our house is very near a golf course, we find these in the backyard a lot, but they're also not terribly expensive and they can be really useful for specific tasks. So let's look at some of the techniques that we can use a ball for. A lot of the areas that musicians end up with knots and excessive tension in are located around our shoulders, our upper back, and maybe to a lesser extent, our chest. And so one of the sets of techniques that we can use a ball for involves using an actual wall as a prop. So you do need to have access to an expansive wall and a ball. I'm going to use my pink practice lacrosse ball for this so that you can see it more easily. So this is really pretty simple, and I'll show you, basically how you would position yourself relative to the wall and the ball, and then what you do once you find your knot. So let's say I'm experiencing some kind of knot up here in my upper back. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put the ball against the wall and then lean into it. And I might have to do some adjusting with my knees to make sure that I'm in the right position. And then usually, it feels good just to have that little bit of massage, but at some point, if you're experiencing a knot, you will have a sort of a moment where you'll hit that spot and you will just know, that is my knot, okay? And so when you're looking at myofascial release, the thing that you want to do then is lean into it. And yes, it will hurt, but if you're dealing with a knot, it's the best way to get it out. So you lean into it, and then you breathe. And doing a really conscious in through the nose, breathe out through the mouth and release the tension, out through the mouth and release the tension. Do that very deliberately and really sit there and lean into it until you will usually feel, after 30 seconds, after a minute, you will feel the knot sort of go a little bit. Maybe it won't dissipate entirely, but it will release a bit, okay? So again, position your ball on the wall so that it's at an appropriate height. Jiggle yourself around with your knees, find your knot, lean into it. I'm not wincing because I don't actually have a knot there. Okay, now this same thing can be done. Shoulders. Shoulders are a big point of tension. And you can see, you could sort of walk yourself around. You use your free hand to adjust the position. You've got the back of the shoulder, you've got the front of the shoulder, you've got the lower part of the shoulder, you've got the top of the shoulder. You can basically roll yourself around. And this is so much more focused than a foam roller. And it really, sometimes if you're just experiencing general fatigue and soreness, this can be a great thing to do. You just sort of roll around on the ball, let it work through the tissue a little bit, and let things release. You can do it for your chest. I know those of us who play instruments where we're constantly, in this position or in this position, you can get some excess tension through your chest or across your collarbones. So again, if you position the ball around the muscle where you're getting the knot, where you're experiencing soreness, and if it's just soreness, the technique is going to be different. What I was talking about with the myofascial release and really leaning into it, that's something you do with a knot. It's not something you do if you're sore. If you're sore, a lot of times the best thing to do is just to sort of work the ball through the area. Give yourself a little bit of self-massage, and do that. So that's a way that you can use a ball and a wall to provide some self-massage. Let's go over here and look at a couple other techniques. Another point of tension, another point where a lot of musicians will experience knots and soreness, is in our forearms. And of course, our hands really don't have a lot of muscle in them. A lot of the muscles that control our hands is located in our forearms, and especially in our upper forearms. And so when we're experiencing hand pain, when we're experiencing a lot of tension, a lot of times we'll get referred pain in our hands. That has a lot to do with the musculature of our forearms. So having a set of techniques and tools that we can use to address soreness and knots in our forearms is really useful. So the most basic thing we can do, and I'm switching up the ball I'm using here. I used the pink ball against the wall. I'm going to use a lacrosse ball for this, partly because my forearms are an absolute mess of tension and of overuse. I don't actually have tendonitis right now, but I carry a lot of tension. I mean, we use our hands a lot, and so there's a lot of tension and a lot of strength and a lot of mobility that I need to have in my forearms. So the most simple thing I can do is really just take a ball and work it in. And this is something that you can explore by yourself. How hard do I have to push? When I'm on the top of my forearm, that's actually, I can't push so hard. When I'm on the bottom of my forearm, I can't dig in hard enough. So one of the things we can do, for instance, I could very easily get a great deal of relief from just working the ball around the muscles on the top of my forearm. If I'm on the bottom of my forearm, I might put the ball on a table, put my arm on top of it, and work it around like that. And I can even add some extra pressure if I add some pressure with my other hand. If you're suffering from any kind of tennis elbow or something like that, a lot of times working out some of the tension, the extra tension that you're carrying in the muscles of your forearm can be really useful. You can work the whole length. You can go along the length of the muscles. You can work across the muscles, which is often a really useful way to break up some tension. And again, if you have a knot up here, you can use the same technique where you find it, you lean into it, lean into it for a minute, 30 seconds, a minute, and really consciously breathe in through your nose, breathe the tension out through your mouth, and release the tension that you're feeling. And a lot of times you will have that experience of feeling the knots sort of go, which is just the best feeling. Another great use for a massage ball and a seat or a table about this height is actually for hamstrings. And this might not be so musician specific, but on the other hand, if you are out there hitting the gym and living your active lifestyle and trying to sort of maintain the health of your body as much as you can, you might occasionally have some sore hamstrings or even a knot or a cramp. Cross ball, table, instant relief. Now this is one that can get kind of sensitive. There's some areas of the hamstring that can be quite tender, but again, it's really simple. You just sort of support yourself on your other three limbs so you can adjust the amount of pressure that you're putting there, and then you just roll around and find your spot. Similar to the hamstring work, you can use this to work on your calves too, which again is maybe not so musician specific, although the ravages of high heels, maybe your calves need some work. So this one, it might be useful to use something like a yoga block or a couple of books, ball on top of there. And again, supporting your weight, body weight on your foot and your two hands. You can sort of roll yourself back and forth, knock the ball off the block, roll yourself back and forth, and work your way through any tension that you find in your calves. Oh, that feels good. A lot of musicians have occasional lower back stiffness and discomfort, and a lot of times actually one of the causes of that is not so much anything happening in the lower back, it's stuff happening in your hips and your butt. We spend a lot of time sitting down, and so there's a lot of potential for discomfort related to that. The massage ball is a great tool. So essentially what you're going to do, since we're targeting our hips and our butt here, is to support your weight on your two hands and your foot. That's the most important thing, because this can get really uncomfortable if you're not alleviating some of the pressure. So you can dictate how much pressure you're going to use either by choosing a softer ball or by supporting your weight, and probably by both. So I will use a lacrosse ball, and say I'm working on this hip. I'll just put it under there, and I will start to work on that. And I'll try to find spots where there are knots, and I'll find spots where there are points of tension, and maybe I'll just work my way through there gently to sort of make sure that there's no adhesion, make sure that there's nothing happening there that is dysfunctional. For the butt, you just retarget. So again, you might cross your leg over here, supporting your weight on your two hands and your other foot, and just work it around through all those big muscles back there, largest, strongest muscles in the entire body that can, if they get messed up and they have knots and tension, it can radiate all over and can create lower back pain, can create hamstring pain. It's just amazing. But they're incredible muscles, and we should take care of them. And one of the ways we can take care of them is by using a massage ball. Golf balls are amazing for feet. Now, you could use them for other things. You can use them maybe like on a really targeted area like your forearms, because again, the smaller the ball is, the greater the focus of the pressure is going to be. But one issue that musicians deal with a fair amount is the fact that when we go to work and when we go to perform, we're often wearing shoes that aren't necessarily the most comfortable. I know women wearing high heels. That can be pretty, can wreak havoc on your feet. I know that my dress shoes are not the greatest shoes for my feet, and if I have to wear them for a really long period of time, I will notice it. So what I will do, so I'll put my lacrosse ball there, and then I will roll the bottom of my foot. And again, I have most of my weight on this leg. I'm not really standing on the lacrosse ball, so I can modulate the amount of pressure that I have, but I will run it up and down the arch. I will run it across the arch. I will run it around the toes, up there under the ball of the foot, just to get that sort of sense of relief and to work through whatever tension I might have in my feet. This one feels really good, so I'm just going to do the other foot right now too. So to finish up, I thought I'd show you my favorite set of movements that I do with a thoracic peanut. A lot of us, again, we experience a lot of discomfort and knots in our upper back, and also making sure that our shoulders are moving properly is really important. So the mobility of our thoracic spine is incredibly important to our ability to use our shoulders correctly. So here are 3 movements that I do with this, and they just started mowing the lawn. I'm sorry, I'll talk loud. So again, we position this sideways, and then we find our place where it is pretty much directly underneath our shoulder blades. So you can sort of feel where that is, okay? First movement, arms in the air, sit up and roll back, sit up and roll back, sit up, roll back. Do this 5 to 10 times. Next movement, put your head down on the ground, arms at your sides, arms overhead. Arms at your sides, arms overhead. Arms at your sides, arms overhead. Last one. Arms above, arms to the side. Arms above, arms to the side. Arms above, arms to the side. And then as a bonus, you've probably seen people do wall slides. You can do wall slides on the floor like this. Slide up as long as you can keep your elbows in contact with the floor. Up. After I do those exercises, I literally feel like I can breathe again. It's really remarkable. But that's how I use a thoracic peanut. So why do we use balls for self-massage? They are portable, they can target problem areas really easily, and they can be used to target a lot of the problem areas that musicians have physically where we're apt to experience knots or excessive tension. So again, there's a number of different tools you can use. It's most important to remember that you're not trying to beat yourself up. You're trying to make yourself feel better. You're trying to release knots. You're not trying to create further damage. So making sure that you're making the proper choices around the hardness of the ball, making sure you're making good choices around how you're using the technique you're using, how you're mitigating the pressure a little bit, can be really important. But I think that these are some of the most amazing tools that we have, especially sort of on the job site at the moment. They're really incredible tools that we can use to help maintain our mobility and our ability to move our bodies in a healthy way while we play.